Welcome back. Former President Donald Trump is leading in many polls in the weeks before President Biden announced he was dropping out of the race, but some have him practically neck and neck with Vice President Kamala Harris. So what does the future look like for the Trump campaign as we roll on towards November? Let's bring in our guest, Corinne Clark, co-founder of Free Press Fail, up late with me tonight on the Final Five. Good to see you again, Corinne.
Good to see you, too. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. So, look, as things stand right now, as you look ahead past, obviously, the events of the last couple of weeks and what a breakneck speed this news cycle has moved, former President Trump, how is he doing? Do you think that there needs to be a pivot now that he has a different opponent here?
I think there will naturally be some kind of pivot having a completely different opponent. Obviously, Kamala is an entirely different beast than Joe Biden. I think that that's excited some of the Democrats, and that is something that Trump will have to deal with. But I do think with the way that the news cycle moves, which you had just mentioned is incredibly fast these days, we will see different opportunities for Trump to gain even more momentum. And I can't even tell you what those are going to be because this news cycle just keeps surprising all of us.
Yeah, no doubt about that. At this point, we're still waiting to hear who her running mate will be, but she also has not submitted to any really substantive interviews as the presidential candidate for her party. Of course, she hasn't been nominated yet. That'll happen in a couple of weeks from now. What do you think are the big issues? What are the issues that voters are going to take to the polls come November?
I think that the main issues that we keep seeing are going to be the economy and immigration. I think both of those are a little bit of a struggle for the vice president, and she will have to answer for Biden's record, even though I think she'll probably try to pivot away from that as much as she can, but Biden's record will haunt this ticket. I think that will be the biggest thing that she has to overcome. But her VP choice might help relieve a lot of that. I know there's talk of Mark Kelly in Arizona. Maybe that will be her pick. That can kind of take some pressure off the border because Mark Kelly is a little bit of a stronger border Democrat. So we'll see. And then we have some Democrats that are strong on manufacturing and jobs, and like Shapiro in Pennsylvania. I think that might be something to help give her campaign momentum on those issues that are going to matter to Americans in November.
Yeah, as we talk about running mates, J.D. Vance, again, he was nominated within the last couple of weeks as well, and he's been making the rounds. How has the rollout been? I know that there's been a lot said about some of the comments that he has said in the past, but from your perspective, as you watch him making the rounds, doing these rallies, what can be done? Is he doing the right thing right now as the vice presidential running mate for Donald Trump?
Yeah, I think he was a great choice for Donald Trump. I think J.D. Vance speaks to a core voting group in those Rust Belt states. He is the American dream. He was one of those guys who worked his way up from nothing. I think he speaks to a lot of those voters in Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, which are obviously going to be huge states in the upcoming election. He reminds them that he is one of them. And I think that that's what he's been doing on the campaign trail. Of course, he's going to face some criticism. Of course, the left is going to come out after him. If they didn't, I'd be concerned. That would mean they thought he was not a threat at all. But I think that J.D. Vance is a really strong candidate, and we're going to see continued criticism of him because that's what they need to do. That's the name of the game. Yeah.
I know a lot has been made about the comments about so-called childless cat ladies that was made on cable news a couple of years ago. There was some damage control there, trying to explain what he was articulating. Democrats have seized on that moment, as you said, saying that this is sort of an anti-woman take that he's been espousing out there. Course correction-wise, though, has he set the record straight on that?
I think the record is very clear. I think he had a chance to set the record straight also in 2022 when he actually said that for the first time. So it was kind of digging up this old argument, but it speaks to something that a lot of Americans do feel, that Democrats have become this kind of parody of childless leftists who do not support American families. I think there are a lot of American families out there that feel that way, and that is the kind of thing that JD was speaking to. I think the record's pretty clear. And I think that particular argument against him was really meant to stir up a certain crowd online, just get some bad press out there. I think it'll die down. It already has. And I don't think it hurts him overall.
Well, clearly outreach is important in this race. And we saw former President Trump speak before that the National Association of Black Journalists convention today. I think he deserves a good amount of credit for walking into a room where he knew that there was going to be some hostility. And that was really articulated by many people who were going to be attending online there. But clearly, this is an important constituency that the Republicans would like to win over. They see some inroads with the African-American community. Do you think he did the right thing? I mean, you were free press failed. Did he do the right thing walking into a room of journalists today?
I absolutely think that Donald Trump is one of the best candidates at outreach, and he will walk into any room and talk to anybody. And I think that that's a lot different than any other nominee the Republicans have ever had. Of course, that comes with consequences. Like we said, there's some hostility. I think he faced that pretty well. There's going to be some criticism, and there's a lot of people already saying that was a great interview for him.
Yeah.
But I think what we should always encourage is our candidates to talk to audiences that don't normally welcome them. And I'm glad that we have a nominee that walks into that hostile room and always has that conversation.
You don't know where you can pick up votes, and I think that's the important thing to get by. So that's what we saw play out today. Corinne, good to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And the Final Five is back after this.